and for all the things that he does technologically that make it possible for all of us to do this. I really appreciate that, Casey, and thank you very much. I don't want to forget to do that. It's now 8 o'clock, maybe a minute after 8 o'clock, and this is the Franklin County legislative breakfast for February. We usually have one every month, and this is our February meeting. I'll introduce myself, and then I'm going to ask all the other members of the delegation to introduce themselves. My name is Representative Lynn Dickinson. I represent St. Albans Town, about 2/3 of the town, and I am on the Commerce Committee.
Thanks, Lynn. Representative Casey Toof. I represent St. Albans City and part of St. Albans Town, along with Representative Mike McCarthy. I serve on House Education, and if I seem a little off, it's because I am running the meeting, so I'm admitting people, so I get a little distracted easily with this, so it's hard to multitask. Thanks.
Thank you. And Lisa?
Yes,
You're muted, Lisa.
I sure am. Thanks. I'm Representative Lisa Hango. Good morning. And I represent Franklin 5, which is along the northern border, Richford, Berkshire, Franklin, and Highgate. And I serve on the House General Housing and Military Affairs Committee. And I'm co-chair of the National Guard Legislative Caucus.
Senator Parent.
Hi, I'm Corey Parent. I'm one of your two senators for Franklin County and Alberg. I serve on Senate Agriculture and Senate Institutions Committee.
Representative Rosenquist.
Good morning. Representative Rosenquist, representing the town of Georgia, and I serve on the Human Services Committee. Thank you.
Brian Savage.
Good morning, Representative Brian Savage from Swanton. I serve Franklin 4, which is the towns of Sheldon and Swanton, along with Bob Norris of Sheldon. And he, unfortunately, I don't believe can join us today due to a prior commitment. And I serve on House Transportation, and Representative Norris serves on House Judiciary.
Barbara Murphy.
Good morning. I'm Representative Barbara Murphy, serving Franklin 2, which is the town of Fairfax, and I am on the General Housing and Military Affairs Committee with Representative Hango and Vice Chair of the delegation.
Representative McCarthy.
Hi, I'm Mike McCarthy. I represent Franklin 3-1 along with Representative Toof here in St. Albans City and the southern portion of St. Albans Town. I serve on House Government Operations and as the Assistant Majority Leader Whip in the House.
Senator Brock.
Hi, I'm Senator Randy Brock. I'm the Senate Minority Leader. I serve on the Finance Committee and the Economic Development, Housing, and General Affairs Committee, as well as the Joint Information Technology Oversight Committee.
Representative Leffler.
Hi, I'm Representative Leffler. I represent Enosburg and Montgomery, and I serve on the House Judiciary Committee.
Okay, do I have everybody? I think I do. And I will start out. Is there anyone?
Lynn, do you forget about me? Am I not important?
James, you are here. Please go, Representative Gregoire.
Yeah, as Representative Gregoire, I represent Fairfield, Fletcher, and Bakersfield. As I told the rest of the delegation, I'm at work this morning, but right now I'm slinging beer, but I will be listening, and if I can participate, I will. But unfortunately, running a business, you don't have the opportunity to say I'm not going to work. So.
Okay, thank you. Now, again, we're going to have some basic ground rules. We're all going to, we hope to be civil and polite to each other. We can agree to disagree without being disagreeable. And I know we have a very large group here today, so I'm going to ask when you speak or ask a question, Casey's going to be calling on people. And we ask that you either raise your hand if you know how to do Zoom, where you raise your hand like that. then that works really well. And it shows up on the side of the participants in case you can see that. If you can't figure out how to do that, that's fine. Just raise your hand like that. Somebody will call and you will try to remind Casey if he doesn't see you right away. But I'm going to ask that you identify yourself, and if you have an affiliation of some kind, that would be helpful. There are some regulars here, and I'm going to start out with one of them. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to say that we had a delegation meeting on Thursday, and one of the things that came out of that delegation meeting was a letter that we're writing to the USCIS regarding the cutbacks in the staffing at our St. Albans office up here in St. Albans. I don't know if Representative Hango or she put a letter together, and I believe just about everybody signed on. Do you want to talk about that first, Lisa?
Sure. Yes. In response to the news press release in the County Courier, we decided as a delegation on Thursday to write a letter to the Customs and Immigration Service. We are also going to be copying all the city officials and our congressional delegation on it. Everyone in this delegation, all 13 members of us, have signed on to the letter, and I am just waiting for one more address to be able to mail it out. And I will also follow up with an email, so all of those parties also have a copy of the letter.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Is there anyone who wants to go first? If not, I'll call on one of our regulars.
Cameras? Is that what you're referring to? Do they want them or not want them?
We would like everyone, if they want to speak, to raise their hands or indicate that they want to speak, and we'll call on you. Like I say, you can use the hand that's part of Zoom down here where you can raise your hand like that. Or you can raise your hand like this. But if no one is willing to start, I will start with calling on Amy Brewer, who is a regular and who can start off with.
There's a hand up, Lynn.
Oh, is there a hand up?
Yep.
Okay, Nancy, go ahead. You're muted.
Good morning again. I said it to myself earlier. I have 3 questions first, because I don't know where people are on 3 different legislations this year. The first that I would like to hear representatives talk about is their support for S59 regarding the teacher retirement system. And I also would like to hear people's reaction to House 183, which is amending the current consent laws around sexual assault. And I also would like to hear the legislators speak regarding the proposed SRO legislation. So before I ask or say anything else, I really would be more interested right now and find out where my legislators are on those 3 issues.
Okay, Nancy, where do you come from?
I am from St. Albans Town. I'm actually Casey's neighbor.
Okay, can I ask you to repeat the third one? You have S59, which is the retirement
Yes.
bill, and H183, which involves consent laws for sexual assault.
Yeah, as well as establishing a statewide intercollegiate sexual assault prevention program for colleges.
Okay, and the third one is?
Or overview panel, excuse me. And the third one is there are 2 proposed legislations regarding or proposed bills regarding SROs in schools.
Oh, SROs. Okay, those are Senate bills, I believe.
Okay, I didn't get the Senate number bills for those. I apologize.
Yeah. Why don't we start with that last one first? I believe Senator Brock is the sponsor of one of those bills.
I am. There are 2 bills. The first is a bill that essentially prohibits school resource officers in schools. The second bill, of which I am one of a number of co-sponsors, actually provides funding for SROs in terms of grant funding for schools that do not have them. These bills represent two different views and approaches of the value of school resource officers. My bill supports school resource officers and does recognize their value. I believe there was an article in the Messenger yesterday that quoted me at some length on the subject. And the notion of school resource officers, most of the feedback, not 100% of it, that I've gotten from school officials, from teachers, from law enforcement officers, and from parents has been strongly supportive of SROs. In particular, the one incident that we have that involves the potential of a large-scale mass shooting in Vermont is the incident that happened in Fairhaven a couple of years ago. In that case, an individual, former student at the school, concocted a plan to do a mass shooting. And the plan was not simply talk. It had gone to the extent of buying firearm to use for that purpose. The individual confided in a friend who was a student at a school in New York. And her response was to go to her school resource officer at the school and report the plot. And the plot was therefore foiled because of that. The school resource officer in New York contacted the state police here, and action was taken. One of the interesting things about that plot was that the individual who was planning it had indicated, and he did subsequently confess to the fact, that his plan, he recognized only one thing would prevent him from carrying it out, and that was the school resource officer at Fairhaven Union High School. And it was his goal to shoot that officer first. That, plus a number of other things, tell us that school resource officers do have value, and there's value beyond that. And I won't go into great detail today, leaving time for others to speak on the subject.
Do I get to respond to comments? I'm just curious about how this works. It was my question originally. I had 3 questions, and I don't know what the protocol is, if somebody could advise me.
Well, we could talk about one of the others if you don't have any further questions. We had S59. I'm not familiar with the bill. I know that there is, the treasurer came out with some guidelines regarding the pension fund that has been underfunded since the 1990s, and which is now in a crisis situation. This is both for the state employees and the teachers. The teachers is complicated by the fact that when they have what they call the OPEB, the benefits after retirement, the mostly health benefits after retirement, they were being taken out of the pension fund itself, which only lowered the teachers' retirement fund that much more, which has put them under the actuarial limit. Again, Senator Brock spoke about this yesterday on, or Thursday on VPR and with their noontime commentary. I don't know, do you want to talk about that at all, Randy, as well?
Just briefly, this issue of underfunding and an unsustainable pension system has been around for many, many years. And I know a number of us have spoken of the fact that we could have continually kicked the can down the road, recognizing that we have a funding system that is unsustainable. In the past year, well, right now we're about $5.7 billion below the amount of money that we need to meet our pension obligations over the next 30 years. And the amount that we have to put in each year is growing. We just to meet the actuarially required contribution, we have to spend about $200 million a year, and that number is going to grow. And that number is more than we spend for most other things in government, such as protection statewide, higher education. We're exceeding that. These pension obligations increased by $600 million last year alone, because one of the things that we've been doing, and I don't want to get too far in the weeds here, is that we put in an amount of money in which we estimate that the fund will grow each year that is unrealistically high. And by it being unrealistically high, it lowers the amount of what the unfunded liability is. When we corrected that, and we corrected it twice in the past 5 or 6 years, it's made the total grow. And the point is, we can't continue to kick this down the road. And we're all at fault. The legislature's at fault, the administration is at fault, the teachers, everybody's at fault. for allowing this thing to go to where it is now, and we can't continue to do it. The teachers, the state employees, their unions, and the treasurer's office are in negotiations right now. I wouldn't pay a whole lot of attention to the particular bill that we're talking about, because this is going to change. And the sides have to get together, and I think they are making progress in coming up with a series of plans that would involve additional contributions, that may involve some changes in the way that pensions are paid and calculated. It may also include some changes in the amount of contributions. And I think that all of these things will come together, but the point is we have to keep pressure up to make that happen. We can't continue doing it the way we're doing it now. And let me add one thing. All sensitive to the fact that teachers and state employees have contributed significantly. They've met their obligations. They've paid the money that we've asked of them. And we've made promises as a state, and we need to keep our promises. And so that also is an overlay to what we're doing.
Yeah, the appropriate
Lynn,
person to talk about probably would be the treasurer. Is there anyone else? Mike, do you want to talk about this?
Just briefly, I know that there's been some testimony taken in the Senate, but I think that the agreement between Senate and House leadership is that the policy work is on pensions is really going to start in the House. And we've spent significant time this week in my committee in House Government Operations talking about one piece of this, which is the OPEB, which we're focused right now on a proposal from the treasurer to get on track with funding the teacher healthcare benefits, at least in a way that will be more sustainable. So we're making a recommendation and doing an extra day of testimony on Monday in order to get on track with that. The larger conversation around both the state employee and the teachers' pensions, the treasurer's required to take the actuarial information that Senator Brock was discussing and make recommendations in her January 15th report. And the treasurer is very respected, and I have a lot of respect for Beth Pierce myself. But looking at the assumptions from last year, when we saw so many retirements due to COVID, when we're in an unusual place economically, has compounded the numbers in the out years that were already unsustainable to the point that Senator Brock was making. So, the speaker and House leaders have made it really clear that we want to have the larger conversation, but that doesn't mean that we're taking up the treasurer's recommendations whole cloth. And I think there's been a lot of anxiety from state employees and teachers. I've heard of people, rushing to retire before any drastic changes are made. And, to Senator Brock's point, we're going to keep the promises that we've made to folks who are in the system now, and then look to work with the treasurer on making sure that we do have a sustainable funding plan, and work with the public employees unions to make sure that, are we being realistic about the benefits that we're offering folks who are coming into the system. And so we want to put everything on the table, but that doesn't mean there's going to be some switch flipped on July 1st where everybody should rush to the door in order to get the benefits that they've been promised if they've been in the system, because I think we almost universally want to keep our promises to people who've been paying in and doing what they're supposed to do. To the comment about sort of, everybody being at fault, I think when we really have tried over the last few years to continue to put more money into the system to meet, a plan to get us to a place where we've funded our liabilities in that out years, 30 years from now, the goalpost got moved in January. And now we need to figure out whether it was really realistic to move that goalpost or if it was a point in time. So we're not only questioning what policies need to be changed in terms of how pensions and healthcare is administered in the out years. We're looking at, are the assumptions that the actuaries made and that the board made the right assumptions, and are those billions of dollars that we're looking at over 30 years real numbers, or are they crystal ball numbers that are squishy? So we're taking lots of testimony and aren't going to be making any rash decisions on that.
Okay, Nancy, what was the third one? Does anyone understand or know what 183 is about,
I can talk about that too.
okay, Mike, go ahead.
That's my committee, Mike. But
Oh, okay. Yeah, I just wanted to say that that I believe that's Representative Sarah Copeland Hans's bill, and I'm generally supportive of that legislation. Although I have heard from folks who are experts on consent from the Domestic Violence Network, for instance, that they do have some concerns that it might open up victims of sexual assault to some challenges as written. So I think it's definitely worth talking about, but I know there are some concerns from people who are expert in consent law. So I would want us to move cautiously if that's going to get taken up, but I'd leave it to folks in judiciary to talk about that.
Okay, Felicia, do you want to talk about that? Have you taken any testimony on that?
yeah, just briefly, we started taking testimony on that last week. And we've had a host of different people from DEVA to the Defender General's office to the Attorney General's office to the sponsor of the bill, as well as some other witnesses in that I'm not recalling off the top of my head. It does seem that this is a bill that will be getting quite a lot of attention in the Judiciary Committee. There are a couple issues with the text as written, just good intention but unforeseen consequences. So it's definitely something that we're going to be taking some extensive testimony on and really trying to work with the intent of the bill to structure the language in a way that it supports the intent without any negative repercussions. So that's something that will be changing as we keep going forward, but I do expect that the Judiciary Committee will be continuing to take extensive testimony on that bill.
Okay, Casey, do we have, who's next?
All right, thanks, Lynn. And thanks, Nancy, for the question. I'm sorry I didn't get the chance to answer it. None of these bills are currently in House Education. And typically we don't look at bills that aren't in our committee until they come to the floor. We have a big discussion on them. So I appreciate the question. Next, I have Jen Williamson.
We can't hear you. Looks like you're. And can you speak a little louder?
Okay, can you hear me now?
There we are. Okay, good.
Okay, hi. I am Dr. Jen Williamson, and I am a resident of St. Albans Town. And I am also running for the Maple Run Unified School District town seat to be a board member. And I did read the article in the Messenger yesterday about the bill that Senators Brock and Parent are bringing to legislation. And I was really concerned about this one particular part in the article where it said, if passed, the bill would give discretion to trained SROs and law enforcement, not the Agency of Education or the State Board of Education, on all aspects of restraint and seclusion on school property pursuant to 20 VSA 2358. And I was just hoping that the senators could explain to me why they think it's okay for law enforcement officers to be in control of our children on school grounds rather than the schools themselves.
Thanks for the question, Jen. I think the larger piece on the bill and any piece of legislation that first comes out, it's, you know, they get drafted for and such for different reasons. And, you know, the big piece I think of that one is it provides funding for towns that choose to have their SRO in their classroom. I know there's a core group of people who have an issue with SROs in our community, but I think overwhelmingly SROs have been very positive in our community and people support them. I think that's a piece of the bill that could be looked at, but the most fundamental reason why I supported the bill was so that school districts who don't maybe have the money in their budget, but, you know, want to be able to add an SRO protection to their school, have the ability to do so. I don't think the state should mandate SROs in schools, and I don't think the state should take SROs out of schools. I think that's a local decision that each school district can make for them up on their own. You know, and we're seeing it in the Maple Run School District now, that debate unfold, and you know, we'll know in 2 weeks how the voters feel on that issue.
Anyone else have something to say on this?
I do,
Go ahead, Randy.
just to add to the issue of restraint. The issue of restraint is typically a law enforcement response to a situation involving violence. And the reason that that particular provision is in the way it is that we are looking very, very closely as a state at police violence, at the whole issue of use of force. And the legislature has done statutory work in that area and continues. So we know that the whole issue of restraint is one that's under a microscope. And by centralizing that responsibility with law enforcement, it means it's going to be watched. If it's diffused around educational issues of people who are overseeing restraint issues who don't have either the background, the experience, the training, the talent, but above all, the oversight. So why that's there. Obviously, in any bill, this is the first bill, it's subject to discussion, and the committees that are looking at this will clearly be taking testimony to fine tune it.
And just to add on to that, can you guys speak to the cases in St. Albans about the school resource officer who was arrested, tackled a student, used a slur against him, and other cases that are being brushed and swept under the rug by the school district and not being acknowledged and not being brought to public? Can you speak to those?
Sure. I think we should have transparency in policing in all levels of our community. There are bad apples and everything, and none of us condone those actions, but we should be talking about reform. Like Randy and I and a lot of the legislators here have been involved in looking at ways to reform police and to gather more data and to provide more training. I mean, look at our two municipalities, that are in that community. I mean, through my day job, Jen, I know you're part of the discussion, but the town of St. Albans has started a police advisory committee. The city of St. Albans has started a police advisory committee. I think transparency is good, but to me, getting rid of the program is a lot different than fixing something. I think for what I talk to, it's 80% plus positive, and so there are things to fix. And I think our energy is better spent trying to fix the program than debating should the program exist or not. Obviously, people have disagreements there, but like Senator Brock said, I think the discussion ought to be around how we reform it and make it work for as many people as possible.
Casey?
All right. Thank you. Next, I have Robert and Debbie T.
Hi. I just have a comment and one question.
Could you please
first of
identify
all,
yourself? Excuse me, Robert. Could you please identify yourself?
Yes, I'm Robert from Berkshire, Vermont. Very close, living to Lisa Hango. But anyway, my comment is the rollout for the COVID vaccine. I don't know if you guys were all involved in that, but I do know that the senator and Dr. Levine, it runs very smoothly. It was just an outstanding experience to see the state doing something so well. My question deals with Senate Bill 12 and House Bill 771, dealing with the exemption of military retirement pensions being exempt from state tax. If you could address that. I know that many of you are sponsors or co-sponsors of these bills. Thank you.
Thank you. Would Representative Gregoire want to speak on that first?
Yeah, let me just get away from the cashier station here. Basically, that's a bill that we've been asked to introduce for years, and it recognizes that Vermont's one of, I think it's 7 now, states that do not do this. And it's an effort to attract military retirees back to the state or even to the state for the first time. Military retirees usually retire at 40 years old, somewhere in that vicinity, which means they're going to have a second job. They're going to work again. Most military retirees do not just stop and say, oh, my retirement's enough. So you're going to get the taxation out of that income. You're also going to have people who have a decent amount of purchasing power. So you're going to get sales tax. They're usually people who have skills, et cetera, that are going to give them higher paying jobs. So they're going to have a fairly decent home. So you're going to get property taxes. So it's a recognition, first of all, our service as a veteran is kind of important to do that for other veterans, I feel. But also, it's a great economic tool because you're bringing people in who can give us more tax revenue in every other avenue. So it's really a win-win for the state. But again, it's a recognition for people who spent their entire career serving the country at lower pay than they probably could have got somewhere else, and with the likelihood of being put in danger both in training and in actual deployments. So that's basically the gist of why I put my bill in, and I know the governor has his own version, which implements it a little bit slower.
I think I just have one comment. It's not just to attract veterans from coming to the state, but it's also to keep veterans that are serving in the National Guard now to stay in the state. Many of my fellow veterans that over the last 2 years that I've been working on this bill have basically moved out of the state and gone to one of those states that basically do not tax veterans benefits. So it's incumbent of the legislators to basically do something to retain the existing veterans that are working in Vermont. Some of them do have second jobs, but to keep them here and also to attract soldiers from other states to come and retire to Vermont.
Yeah.
Right, and that's what I did say. I did say that we want to keep who's here, but we also want to attract others. So that is important. And it is partially about recognition, which is very important, and you and I as veterans know that. But it's also a great tool for those who don't believe, as we do, that the veterans should be recognized. It's also a great economic tool for the entire state, and so we got to sell it both ways.
Yeah, I'd like to address that as well, in that in Commerce, we've been talking about workforce development and recruiting people from different, the state-to-state program, there was that $10,000 remote worker program. But one of the things that we talked about extensively the past couple of years has been the desire to have the Adjutant General go and people from labor to go over to, like, say, Fort Drum, to recruit people into the National Guard, people who are retiring, again, with the idea that they would come here, they would live here, they would move here, and they might want to participate in the National Guard at that point. And again, the National Guard there's a variety of skills that they need. And of course, and what we've understood is that the number one question that people look at when they go into a retirement situation or look at the Guard, they look at how much money, they're going to be able to keep. And they sit down and they line up those states that do not tax their benefits. And when Vermont is one of the few that still does, that's important to them in not a good way. But, it's the other thing, of course, is we have the same issue we just talked about it the other day. The tuition, the free tuition for National Guard who want to go to school. This is a recruitment tool for the National Guard. We have a very thin workforce. We have a very difficult time finding enough people to work at the jobs we have, and the National Guard is no different than any other employer. It's a wonderful employer. It has a lot of really good opportunities for young people. And so the possibility of having free tuition at this, for instance, at any school, but we provide a tuition-free option for people. And there was, and that has been a real improvement because people from Vermont would go and join the National Guard in other states just to get that benefit. So those are the kinds of things that we're talking about in Commerce. And I believe Representative Hango wanted to speak on this as well.
Thank you. Yeah, since that is in the committee that I'm on with Representative Murphy, and also it's a very high priority of our new Legislative National Guard Caucus, which I know, Mr. Tower, you are aware of that we formed that this year. We have a number of bills this year in as a caucus. We have about 11 or 12 bills in, I've lost count, on various issues that pertain to either Veterans Affairs or military service members, National Guard members. And 3 of those, by my count, deal with this issue of military pay military retirement pay being exempted from taxes. One of them uses a model that's very similar to what we use in this state for Social Security income. One of them is a deduction of 50% in the first year after retirement and 100% after that. So there are a number of different iterations. I can certainly give bill numbers if folks are more interested in looking this up, and talk to people offline if you would like on any of these bills. But I want to thank Representative Dickinson for bringing up some of the other things that we're doing for National Guard members. Not only do we have this wonderful tuition benefit program, but we also have a bill in this year that I'm sponsoring for a student loan repayment program for National Guard members who come in. And we have some other bills that are pertaining particularly to veterans and disabled. Any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And if you have them now, fine. And if not, I can always be reached. If you just want to search on the General Assembly website for my name or committee, which is Military Affairs, you will find my email address. Thank you.
Lisa, I was able to look at some of the documents that are on Senate Bill 12, and a lot of the things that you just said are outlined there, especially the phasing in of 25-50% over time may be one of the options that may be beneficial to people like myself and my other veteran friends.
Actually, I was referring to only House bills, Bob. So thanks for bringing up the Senate bills. At this moment, I have not been able to find the time to connect with the senators on that. So I don't know exactly what they have in for bills, but I will definitely look into the Senate bills. And I'm sure some of them are very similar to the ones that we're bringing forward in the House. And it's really just going to be a matter of which ones make the crossover date of March 12th. And if they pass out of the House by then the senators will take them up, and vice versa. So that's the reason for having this large number of bills that deal with pretty much the same subject. They all look a little bit different, and one of them may have a chance of making it across to crossover. So that's our hope.
I hope so.
Thank you, and thank you for your service.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you, Robert. Next on the list, I have Kate McDonald.
Hi, yes, thank you for calling on me. My name is Kate McDonald. I'm a resident of Fletcher, Vermont. I've been a teacher in Vermont since 1993. I've been paying into the state's teachers' retirement since 1995. Like my colleagues across Vermont, I've paid into the teachers' retirement system every single paycheck, regardless of my personal financial status. Teachers are not responsible for inaccurate actuarial predictions regarding the fund's performance. Teachers cannot prevent state government from dipping into our fund to cover other bills. The state of Vermont has an obligation to fully fund the teachers and state employees' pensions according to statute. Anything less is a broken promise. My question is twofold. First, for Senator Brock. Senator Brock, in your initial comments, you listed legislators and teachers as being at fault for the pensions insolvency or the perceived insolvency. Your direct quote was, "We're all at fault." Please describe in detail how teachers specifically are to blame for this situation. And my second question is to the entire legislative slate. Can I get your verbal commitment that you will support Vermont's teachers and work to preserve our current pension structure as designed? Thank you.
May I?
Sure.
In terms of responsibility, when I say that everyone's at fault, I mean that the folks who sat around the negotiating table and negotiated a promise that was not sustainable in each year that the negotiations took place to modify. the original negotiation in terms of the promise has been unsustainable for a number of years. When I say everyone's at fault, is we all recognized it, and sort of pushing this to the point that we resolve it and that we solve the problem is what's really needed. If you want to say, how do we weigh the responsibility? I would put most of the responsibility on the folks who negotiated it. I would put a lot of the responsibility on the legislature that failed to act to fix it sooner. I think that's it in a nutshell. The plan that we have right now is fiscally unsustainable. If we continue to add $600 million a year, which we did in the past year, if we continue along that path, this plan is going to go broke, and we can't allow that to happen. And so that means that we've all got to get together and figure out how to solve it, which is what we're doing right now. Those are the discussions that the treasurer and the state employees union and the teachers union are working on. And I want to let them work on it to the extent that they can try to come up with solutions that work. I know, though, that the financial advisors of the state, of the state treasurer's office, are also working on potential solutions. And I want to see those solutions succeed. I recognize the promises that the state has made.
I'll chime in too. I think we have to look at this from perspective. If we want to preserve defined benefit plans, which I think is a goal of everybody on this call, there is going to have to be some kind of change along the way. And it doesn't mean, we have to look at the best way to build on an on-ramp. But, I don't think we always put money into perspective, because I hear things of like, well, what happens with the lottery fund and just tax the rich and this and that to solve this fund. So when we talk about the extra $100 million the governor put in his budget this year, here are some other things we could do with that money. We can feed every student in the state of Vermont breakfast and lunch for $25 million. We can send every kid who graduates from high school in Vermont to CCV for 2 years for $32 million a year. So when you think of these other issues people talk about, that's half of the amount of money we're putting into pensions, and we're all standing up and going to put that $100 million in pensions, but that extra $100 million for a total of $300 million this year going into pensions. But that's real money. When we talk billions of dollars, I know at the federal level we talk about that, probably like it pretty cavalier, but in the state of Vermont, that's heavy money. And the other piece too that I don't think people have is politically, this shouldn't be a surprise. I mean, I remember talking with Martha Allen when she was running the teachers union when the governor was negotiating healthcare benefits, and I go, what the best ploy would be for your members? And she goes, what's that? I go, agree to the governor's term, but take the extra $30 million in savings and put it in your pensions. We all know they're in trouble, and no one's wanted to have the conversation. I get it. It's politically, it's tough, but if I'm a school teacher, I want to have this discussion, because you know what happens when the pension does break someday? You lose the benefit. So let's try to fix it. No one's trying to take the benefit away, but having an open and honest conversation, I think it's healthy. Trying to get legislators to commit to one thing or another at the beginning of that conversation isn't healthy. I think we need to have an open mind and look at all of our options. I don't think anything that Beth Pierce proposed, as Mike said, is going to actually be what a final product looks like. There's going to be a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And then the last piece, when we talk about wealth in Vermont, tax the wealthy, I heard from somebody yesterday that there's legislation to tax the top 13% of income earners in the state of Vermont to pay for this. I don't know the exact updated numbers, but just a handful of years to be in the top 10% of income earners in the state of Vermont was a family of four, so 2 working parents making about $116,000 a year. So that's each working parent making $56,000 or $58,000, excuse me. So, we don't have this wealthy class to go in and grab a ton of money from. We might be able to get some, but that alone doesn't solve the problem. So I think we have to have an open discussion and put all options on the table and, have commitments. And, I've responded to a lot of teachers, and my commitment has been those who are in retirement and close to retirement, no changes. I don't want to see a COLA go away, because I think that hurts a defined benefit plan, and I want to protect the defined benefit plan. Everything else has to be on the table, but we've got, I'm guessing this is a 3 to 5 year fix. It's gonna take a while and have a lot of debate. So I appreciate the folks who are bringing their concerns to us and stay engaged, but you know, I'm uncomfortable making really any commitment outside of those ones that I've made, because we just got to look at what's best for everybody.
Anyone else? Casey.
All right. Thank you for the question, and thank you, senators, for the response. Trudy Coffey.
Hi, thanks for having me. My husband's here too in the background. We're both teachers. I taught 20 years in Swanton before moving and going to Colchester. I left a school that I loved, and pay was part of the reason. I think as we talk about teacher pension, you need to keep I'm happy to hear you, some of you say you want to take care of teachers who've been in it like me for 28 years. We need to recruit teachers to Franklin County. And part of the way that we can recruit teachers is by providing good healthcare benefits and a good pension. So my son is a sophomore in college. He's going into education, and I keep asking him, are you sure? Are you really sure that you want to do this? If we want to keep teachers like my son in Franklin County, you need to take care of your teachers. And honestly, right now, it doesn't feel like that's happening. The morale among teachers in our state is not the greatest. Healthcare, pensions, the vaccine, I just think it's important for you to know that. So I'm hoping that you keep in mind that while you're saying you don't want to change things for teachers entering the profession, they're not going to stay here. And I think as you're talking about wanting to retain military people, which I think is fantastic, maybe you can kind of keep that same mindset when you're talking about our young educators.
Can I respond to that, Lynn?
Go right ahead, Casey.
Trudy, I really appreciate that. We have this discussion a lot in House Education, and it is an issue, especially, you know, we specifically talk about Franklin County, but it is the rest of rural Vermont. We're at competition with bigger cities. Burlington, Chittenden County, Washington County are more lucrative for teachers to go to. That's a discussion that, you know, we have to come up with at a local school board what we're going to do. But in the legislature, we need to find innovative ways to keep people. We have great teachers in Franklin County. I actually, my background, I went to Castleton, and I was planning on becoming a teacher, and I fell into politics instead. But the people that we seem to keep in Franklin County, and they're great teachers, but they're usually people that are from the area and come back and want to, you know, give back to their community and be, you know, served as a teacher. And that's one of the issues that we really have to find out. I've spoken with a lot of schools and teachers around Franklin County, and Sheldon's had some problems, I know, retaining people. If you go further east, it's even harder to keep people, and it's just the attractiveness of Chittenden County, and we need to figure out ways to keep them here. Things that we do in like St. Albans, you know, you have to provide people places to go and do, and reasons you want to stay here. So this is a bigger issue than just trying to recruit teachers. I think it's recruiting everybody and keeping Franklin County attractive and taking care of those that want to work here.
Anyone else?
Yeah, Lynn, I'll just weigh in for a second on that. Thank you, Trudy, for bringing this up. It is really something that's on our minds all the time. I've served on a school board in Franklin County for 10 years, and my legislative district has 3 school boards, 3 school districts in it. So I'm really aware of the problems that are facing us in Franklin County. I applaud your son for wanting to go into the profession. We need really good teachers. We need folks who are passionate about teaching our students. So I hope that he can find a way forward with his career plans and be able to stay in Vermont. We're looking at all aspects of this. We're looking at costs to the school district, we're looking at costs to the taxpayers, we're looking at sustainability of the lifestyle of being a teacher. There are a lot of things that we really have to weigh into this formula. So please be assured that we're really struggling with this, and we're trying to find the best way forward. And we just really hope, like Casey said, that we can attract enough people who want to serve the residents of this part of Vermont.
Anyone else?
And I will add, my 7th grade year at City School was probably my favorite year of schooling that I had, and that's thanks to your husband. We were actually having a discussion with this the other day with a friend of mine about how we used to play soccer in the morning, and those types of things that really just stay with you for the rest of your life, and you hope your kids, you know, one of the reasons why I decided to stay in Vermont, I grew up in St. Albans and I'm staying here forever, is because I want my kids to have those experiences that they've had, and part of those experiences started at, you know, how they were taught and what they were taught and the people that they met along the way. So thank you, and thank him if he can hear me.
Anyone else? Casey, do you want to call someone else?
Yep. Thanks. Dave Southwick. Mute, Dave.
Dave, you're muted.
Well, that was such a great introduction. I'm Dave Southwick. I reside in the town of St. Albans, and but today I'm here as a representative of the board of directors for Samaritan House. First of all, I want to introduce you to Ben Kaufman, who is on this call. He is part of the leadership team at Samaritan House, and he has drafted a letter which he will be sending to all of you. I want to highlight a couple of points. We are very close to what is going on in the areas of homelessness, affordable housing, and a lot of the bills that are associated with that. I'm going to read just quickly the highlights of the position statement from Samaritan House to the legislators that he will be sending out. And before I forget, I also want to invite all of you, before you head back out of town for anything, to stop in at the shelter. Make time to meet with Ben and the leadership team to really get an understanding of what's going on at this level. But let me just quickly bring these to your attention. These are key points. One is an increased emphasis in creating affordable housing. We all know that that's high on everybody's list, but we want to emphasize that. But quickly behind that is the fact that there's a big step between homelessness and being in affordable housing. So opportunities for anything that is innovations in transitional housing. How do we move somebody from being on the street through a shelter of some type or some other transitional housing that would get them to a position where they can stabilize to actually get into affordable housing. Many of you may have on your agendas the General Assistance Program, which is scheduled to be transitioned from the state to the communities, along with many of the shelters in the state recommending that that be delayed, that we are rapidly approaching that date, but it's not something that really can be sustained at the county or I'm sorry, at the community level right now, given all the other chaos that we're trying to deal with COVID restrictions. An increase in mental health services. I think it was brought to our attention that the governor's budget was not providing anything new, but for mental health. But we do know that continues to be an issue for the majority of the people who are experiencing homelessness. There is some need for mental health services there. And then I thought this was an interesting piece, but increased assistance in services for single adults. Right now, if you look at the waiting list or the services that are being provided by the Samaritan House, 80% of those services are being provided to single individuals. The other 20% are to families. And while we recognize the importance of the families, a majority of the people that we are serving right now are in that single. And then continue the support for landlords. Of course, there's the eviction freezes. There's a number of things going on, but if the landlords are taxed and cannot create the affordable housing, it just becomes a very vicious circle. I tried to have this conversation with someone yesterday from the city, and I just felt like I just was going around in this big circle. And I know that has to feel the same for each of you. So I'm going to end there, but I do want to, again, direct you to Ben, and please reach out to him. He can articulate more, he can say it more better than I can. And thank you.
Ben, would you like to respond to that?
Not much of a response. Dave just, read the letter. So we'll leave it at, we really invite any of you to reach out. Stop by the shelter. We can give you a COVID safe tour. But give us a call, shoot us an email. We'd be happy to talk on any of those points with you. It's sort of just an overview of things that are really important to us as we get started in this new year. We want to create affordable housing. We want to make sure people stay healthy and safe on their way to that housing. And we do want to make sure that it's not, that eviction freeze is preventing a lot of chaos in the world of homelessness. But as Dave said, in the same breath, if the landlords are forced to take an unfair hit because of things like that, then we're never going to get anywhere. Please reach out to us. We'd love to have you by for a tour. We'd love to talk to you more about any of this stuff, and really look forward to working with you this year.
Okay, we have some people who serve either on housing or human services, and I think we have a former board member from Samaritan House as well. Would anyone like to say something?
Yeah,
I'll start, Lynn.
Okay, we'll start with Lisa.
Lisa, followed by Barbara.
Okay, great. I'm just going to be really brief in my comments because it is my committee and Representative Murphy's, and I want to give her a chance to speak to. One thing that I want to assure you is the General Assistance Program that is slated to be transferred to community partners. We recognize in our committee, and we wrote a memo yesterday, that we do not support the immediate transfer of that responsibility to community partners because we recognize that you are not ready for it yet. None of us are ready for it. We need to have a plan in place that everyone can feel comfortable with that transfer. So we're recommending that it be delayed for 1 year so that everybody has a chance to get on board. And I know we've been talking about this for about 18 months or almost 2 years in the administration to have this transfer happen. But with COVID happening, we've spent the last 12 months dealing with COVID. We have not put any of our resources into planning this transfer of responsibility. So we definitely recognize that. I do want to mention that embedded in the governor's budget all over the place are mental health services. Absolutely, we are not, we are recognizing the need for mental health services, and we are not cutting in any way. In fact, there are increased opportunities for mental health services, but most of those are embedded in parts of the budget and programs that are existing. So I'm sure the people on human services can talk about that a little bit more. And lastly, I'd like to speak about landlord support. That's something I've been really vocal about in my committee. I recognize that landlords are in a really tough place. They have their bills to pay, and with the eviction moratorium and people not being able to pay their rents due to COVID-related costs, landlords are in a really difficult place. So there is much more money coming in terms of rental assistance that can go directly to landlords. Also utility assistance that's coming, that if a tenant hasn't paid their utilities and the landlord is stuck paying them, that will be taken care of as well. So please stay tuned. There are some great things coming out of our committee and the companion committee in the Senate. And I'm going to turn this over to Representative Murphy.
Well, thank you, Representative Hango. And Representative Hango has been part of this conversation a lot longer than I, but I'm just really excited with what we are doing in our committee to put assistance out for all our Vermonters. And some of the new language I've learned in the committee speak has really emphasized, I think, the intentions. And one is that housing is healthcare, and that we've really seen, especially in the pandemic, that if people don't have a house to be safe in, they aren't safe. And so looking at that and all the wraparound services that need to be provided has been a real focus during the pandemic. And I'm very proud of how Vermont has done that. The other piece is that instead of speaking of the homeless, which lets us think a little bit of them as opposed to us, is really discussing it as our homeless neighbor, our unhoused neighbor, and that it puts a different tone to the conversation. And I just really appreciate, again, I can't say enough about how Vermont is addressing an issue that's worldwide, and there may never be a day when we don't have an unhoused neighbor, but really looking at making sure we're doing our best to take care of those that are in need now. So thank you, and thank you, Lisa, for being my mentor as I get up to speed on all our committees doing.
All right, thank
Anyone
you.
else? Stacy?
No, I was just going to move along. We have a little under a half hour left.
Yeah.
And we get to Amy Brewer.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for having me. I'm not sure I realized I was like a regular, but I enjoy interacting with you, and I appreciate the opportunity to hear all of your priorities. I wanted to speak a little bit about menthol and other flavored tobacco products, and let you know that last week in Senate Health and Welfare, they took pretty amazing testimony about the facts and the impact of menthol and other flavored both on youth and adults. And I can't articulate it the same way that the individuals did, but some of the highlights were that, number one, if we take lots of the fruity flavors away from youth and even the regular mint flavor, they're still going to switch to the most flavored, least horrible tobacco flavor or flavored tobacco product. So what we're seeing with some shift in national policy around flavors that youth are transitioning to menthol. It is easier than anything just regular tobacco. I want to mention that menthol for adults.
Amy, I think you froze up. Can you turn off your
Yeah.
video? It might help.
Can you hear me? No. So I'm going to put my information in chat and leave it at that. And here's to great internet.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, and if you have trouble, usually turning your video off to speak helps. Thank you for that information, and if you can always send us email that stuff, and you usually do. So thank you. Kim Gates.
Good morning. My name is Kim Gates, and I am the manager and owner of Franklin Telephone Company. And I just wanted to reach out to our legislators on House Energy and Technology have a bill, I believe it's 185, and it's draft 4-1. I'm not quite sure how to say.
Mm-hmm.
And I have some concerns about this bill. So briefly, it's recreating the VTA, which was not successful the first time, and it's going to take time and money, and I'm not in favor of that. I'd prefer that the Department of Public Service it get folded into the department. They're best suited. Big concern is this bill is not competitively neutral. So tax-paying businesses like Franklin Telephone is at a disadvantage. And I have a concern with transferring state assets. I don't think that's, I think that needs more thought. And rural areas are expensive to build. And I think the money should go towards building, not business plans, which is not what this bill does. You know, broadband build out in Vermont always comes down to money. There just hasn't been that much funding for it. And you can kick the can around and create new entities and new authorities, but it comes down to money. You know, Franklin continues to do our broadband build out, but this bill doesn't recognize it, and it's a disincentive. So I don't really have a question. I just wanted, for information purposes, that I would love to further this discussion with any of you. Please reach out to me, and I will put my in the chat. Thank you.
Kim, I have a question. We talked a little bit about this in our GAP money. One of the issues, maybe you can address this better than I can remember it. Is this the attempt to get the CUD money? And you might want to explain what a CUD is. It's the broadband that's being done by communities.
Yeah, so my understanding is this bill is, the intent of this bill is for this, I believe it's communication union districts. The intent of this bill is to fund them. And I'm not opposed to them, but if you want broadband built now, there are providers that are building it now that aren't going to get any funding or limited funding the way this is written.
That's the competitively non-neutral, not competitively neutral issue. Is that it?
Yes.
Okay, so existing companies that are doing this on their own dime are handicapped with this. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yes, they're very handicapped. This bill is geared towards the CUDs, the communication union districts.
So, like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, which, you know, the intent is well-meaning, but it's, you want broadband built, this bill isn't going to get you broadband built soon.
They're funding business plans, not broadband.
Right. There's some built in it, but they're doing a lot of business planning. So.
All right, it's a complicated issue. I was around when the VTA was in existence, and it was not created logically. And eventually, and by the time we learned the lesson, they decided to get rid of it. I get it.
It is very complicated, and I'd be more than happy to have conversations offline. I don't want to take up time during this, but
yeah. Nobody on our delegations on energy, but yeah, there are people you can speak to in the energy committee.
And I have, and their intent is to fund the CUDs.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Brock has his hand up. Lynn.
Okay, Senator Brock.
The entire issue of broadband is high on the list. And although it's the Energy and Technology Committee in the House, it's the Finance Committee in the Senate. And then also, from an oversight perspective, the Joint IT Oversight Committee. We will have a bill in the Senate also. And that bill likewise reconstitutes the VTA, but does so in a very different way than exists in the House bill. And these bills will have to be reconciled at some point. One of the things, though, that we recognize is that there's an inherent conflict of interest in the Department of Public Service right now. And that's one of the things I believe that's impeded broadband development and expansion. On the one hand, the department has the responsibility to be a regulator, and on the other hand, it has the responsibility to be an advocate. And it's tripping over itself in that regard. The second piece is there is no effective statewide plan or strategy for expanding broadband. A lot of people are doing a lot of things in an uncoordinated way that is both duplicative, and also costly. And the goal is to get this properly aligned and putting somebody in charge of broadband expansion on a statewide basis to coordinate all of these disparate efforts between the legacy providers, the independent providers such as Franklin Telephone, and the CUDs, so that we can get the maximum benefit of the resources that we have. Money, Kim is absolutely correct, is at the heart of the problem. However, we know right now that we have some money that is available immediately to help us. We know that we have a statewide requirement of doing a statewide broadband plan, and that is overdue right now. The plan is supposed to have been done on a 3-year basis. It hasn't been properly completed since somewhere around 2014. Money for planning is critical because we have to have a strategy. Otherwise, we're never going to get there. But the large amount of money, which we know we're going to receive a very significant amount of money in terms of federal funds. And the issue of the VTA is to create a structure so that that money can be used and above all can be leveraged, not just with government money, but ideally with money from the private sector, money that's loaned through VITA and other sources. And that's what we're working on, is to get the money and to ensure that it's being used productively.
Yes, that's what we talked about in our committee also, was the conflict between the Department of Public Service and its role as a regulator and its role as an advocate.
And I would add also, and this is, take it as my opinion as opposed to anybody else's, I don't think the department's done a very good job. I've been very critical of the department and its broadband expansions. I think it's stumbled. I don't think it's had a strategy. I don't think it's had a focus. And I think it's all over the place. And the result is that we are behind where we ought to be. And I think by being better organized and better focused, we can get more done. And the goal is to get broadband to every Vermonter. We've talked about this for years. And I can't even calculate. And nobody can tell me the amount of money that we've spent doing this. And it's time to get that fixed. And that's what we're trying to do right now.
That mirrors what we heard in Commerce. But we don't do that anymore. But yeah. We had a lot of money in 2009 and 10 with the ERA money. We got money this year with the CRF money, and we're probably going to get more with more CRF money or whatever they're going to call it then. So Senator Brock is correct. There has been no statewide plan, and there really needs to be something that creates that and examines that and creates a strategy. That's the reason for the VTA rejuvenation.
And I'd add, though, that Franklin Telephone has been an exception to the rule. They do have a plan. They have been successful at expanding broadband throughout their territory, and we want to make sure that we don't disadvantage them in this planning. So we haven't forgotten you, Kim, by any means.
Thank you.
Casey?
All right, thanks. Megan Conley.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you all for doing this. I am a resident of Swanton. I am a current board director on the MVSD board, and I have a couple things. One, I just want to make a general statement that as our students have been going through COVID and adjusting on a dime to all of these different learning platforms and the changes in how they're learning, it's taking its toll, of course, academically, mentally, emotionally, socially. And I would just like to say that I truly hope that at the state level, there are conversations taking place about how to take care of our students. I am also a higher education professional, and as such, I'm concerned about the gaps in learning that are taking place, and how are we going to address this entire generation of students who have essentially lost a year of learning. And I just hope, again, that conversations are taking place so that we can address those gaps and not just push everybody ahead of grade. Because I think that we are going to see more and more that students are not ready to be pushed up to the next level. And that has a huge impact, of course, across schools and the state. So again, just wanted to share my concern on that and hope that those conversations are taking place. I am also wanting to discuss a little bit the two bills that are in the legislature right now, H54 and S13. And this is the equalized pupil spending and the weighting study that took place. These are major bills that would have major impacts on school budgets and funding. And I would just like to hear from our senators and representatives on their current stance on these two bills that are going through the State House right now.
Yeah, Lynn, can I jump in?
Go right ahead, Casey.
So first, to address the first question, absolutely we are concerned with the mental health of students, and I can tell you as a parent, I have 2 children. One's actually in kindergarten; it's his first year, and I'm really concerned about the development and the social aspect of what he's learning. We're lucky enough to have many people involved in his schooling, so we stay with him. But how many people don't have broadband internet that need to access the stuff that the 15 to 20 slides that we've had. We had a COVID scare. St. Albans Town had shut down, and so we've been remote all week. But it's really hard as a working family to have 2 people in to actually do the work with him. So he actually had way too much screen time this last week, which was really unfortunate. And we are concerned about that. We have federal money that's coming in the form of what they're called ESSER funds. There's a lot more. I think we're in the second phase is coming out. There will be a third phase. This money will be used to help schools with these types of situations, as well as fill gaps other places. But we've kind of got briefing on that this week, so we don't have the full scale of where the money's going to go. So that's to answer that. H54 is something, that's a bill that was presented by Laura Sibilia, and she's really passionate about this, and she's been pushing the Ed Committee to talk about this. And there are a few other bills that are concerned with this, so if H54 or another bill number that will be with it, but we will be talking about it this year. We're seriously looking at it. I don't know if it's moving as quickly as we want out of House Ed, since we have other bills, but it is something that we are in discussion. Trying to think what else we've talked about it, but Laura's been a really big supporter of this bill, and she's very adamant that this needs to move, and so we are discussing this.
I'll chime in too, Lynn. Thanks for the question, Megan. I think a larger conversation, Randy probably can pick up a piece here on the work his committee does, looking at the tax, the commission that just looked at how we tax in the state of Vermont as a whole. But this information is a little old, but I was on Senate Education last term, and before COVID, we were looking at the weighting study. And while it made sense for some communities in Franklin County, some of Franklin County communities are also the worst impacted. Like, town of Georgia was going to see a 52-cent property tax increase. And I just, as a senator who's got to weigh everything, between what Georgia, Fairfax, I think St. Albans Town, Fletcher would have to pay in, way out actually weighed what some of the other communities would save. So I think it's, the hard part, sometimes we don't represent just 1 or 2 towns. You got to weigh everything, and it was a lot, and probably would have, would have been really difficult to push through. Especially as communities like Burlington, we're going to see 30 or 40 cent tax decreases. So I think, Senator Brock probably can talk more to it, but having a conversation about how we pay for education and maybe not have it all be on the property tax, and looking at various different ways is probably a better conversation, I would think, than how we do kind of divvy up the property tax.
Lisa? Rep Hango, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to comment a bit on S54 because I've been sitting in on on meetings of a coalition to implement the pupil weighting study. And I've talked extensively with Representative Sibilia about her bill. I was asked to co-sponsor it. At this time, I decided not to co-sponsor it because there were a couple of concerning things to me and my school districts that are in the bill. But I'll be interested to see how the bill evolves and how it's going to come out of the Education Committee if they do take it up. As for the pupil weighting study itself, it is very much overdue. It's like a 20-year-old formula that we're using now to calculate, and it really does need to be updated. That is something that the Agency of Education has acknowledged, and just about every education professional in the state will probably acknowledge the same thing, that it does need to be updated. And whether this bill does the correct update or not remains to be seen. The legislature has to weigh in on it. But as Senator Parent just said, some communities stand to benefit greatly. and others do not by the implementation of the weighting study. So it is a bit of a juggling act. I know in my own legislative district, 2 school districts would benefit, one of them greatly by the implementation of the study, the new weights, but one community would not. So there's a lot to be thought of, and I do want to tell people that, you know, when you see a bill and you look it up on the internet and you read the text of it, that's likely not what's going to come out that the entire body is going to vote on. It will be changed in the process, and I think the important takeaway from that is that you can reach out to your representatives who sit on those committees or who might have close colleagues who sit on those committees to voice your opinion, to say how you would like to see it changed before it comes out of the committee and goes to the entire body to be voted on. So thanks for bringing that up, Megan, because it really is a hot topic right now, and I know that the Senate in particular is looking at it very closely.
PC, we have 3 more names up there. Do you want to move along to one of them?
Sure. Who's going next? Tiffany Demore.
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much. I'm glad to hear that you support the retired military and recruiting retired service members to move to our state. With that being said, we need to focus on retaining and recruiting teachers. With the retirement issues, Franklin County will continue the cycle of hiring new teachers, great teachers, training them, and then they go to Chittenden County. I have done that myself, so I cannot judge. So that they can have a better salary and then a better retirement. This is also concerning as we are trying to recruit teachers of color or other ethnic backgrounds. Teachers, if they don't see a solid retirement, they're going to leave the state. I think I know where many of you stand and how you support teachers, but I would like to hear a verbal commitment from each of you right now that you will continue to commit, that you will commit to supporting teachers that are in training to be a teacher, currently teaching, and retired. Also, I forgot, I'm from St. Albans City. Sorry about that.
Tiffany, we've got 5 more minutes. If we all respond, it'll take all of the 5 minutes. We've got 2 more people. I think all of us would love to talk
yes
to you.
or no. A simple yes or no will do.
Lynn, can I jump in there?
Go right ahead.
I think all of us to some degree, Tiffany, have made public statements about teachers and our positions on pension and retirement. I think we as a delegation made a decision last year that I hope we'll keep this year, where we tried to get away from simple yes, no going down the line on any issue, in particular because every issue we deal with isn't a simple yes, no. So I can commit to you right now that our goal in House Government Operations is to continue having defined benefit plans for new hires, currently working teachers, and maintaining the promises we've made to those who are already in retirement. I can say that right now, but I can also say that we're going to bring a lot of people in to talk over the next few weeks about some elements of restructuring plans and thinking about how we reduce unfunded liabilities that I know teachers are not going to like. And I don't want to put myself in a position right now, and I'm sure the rest of the delegation doesn't, where we've got to consider every option if our goal is in the long run to make sure that 20 years from now, 30 years from now, we can meet our commitments to the folks that we're going to make sure you have dignity in retirement. We're going to make sure that that money that you're counting on is there for you. Some of the decisions we might have to make in the short run to ensure that are going to be things that I think that some teachers are going to really not like. And I want to be upfront that, the speaker, and I'm a member of House leadership, said we're going to bring everybody together. We're going to make sure teachers and state employees have a strong voice at the table. But we are going to consider all of the recommendations that have been made by the treasurer. We're going to consider recommendations from all of the public unions. And I think we're really committed to making sure that we can live up to the promises that we've made. But I think it's much more complicated than a simple yes or no. And so I want to say my heart is totally a yes, and I'm sure everybody else in the delegation wants to support our teachers. Of course we do. But I think when it gets into the details of the policy, some of us are going to have different details that we'll support or not support, and we should all be transparent with you that that's happening and not commit ourselves to a yes or no.
And I just want to thank Mike for that explanation. I really appreciate it. I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier too, about losing teachers to Chittenden County, which is really concerning. But I can tell you that in-house education, the Vermont NEA is in the building, in the room, whatever, in the Zoom meeting every single day. They have the teacher's best interest at heart. We listen to every side of the coin that comes in and that presents to our committee, and we talk. We've talked about this. This is out of the education committee's control as of right now, like we've said. But yeah, giving just a yes or no. There's a teacher, my sister-in-law's a teacher. A lot of my friends, close friends, are teachers. Specifically the ones I went to college with, because I was in the education program at Castleton, and all my close friends that I spent 4 years of college in went on to become teachers. So we do have those best interests in heart. There's just it's a lot bigger than just a yes or a no. So thank you, Mike, for explaining that.
Thank you. We have Margot and Stephanie. Casey?
Yep, Margot, you want to go?
Is she there? How about Stephanie?
Stephanie.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Miller. I live in the town of Georgia. I've been a resident here for 18 years, and I'm also a teacher for 22 years. And I just want to talk about how unsupported I feel by the Franklin County representatives when it comes to teachers. And it's mostly in the way that we're talked about kind of when we're not the ones you're talking to. I even want to go back to the comment that was said by putting the money into the teachers' retirement systems. I, in essence, just took food away from every student in the state. That sort of negative connotation that by wanting to be able to support and feed myself when I am retired, that I am then taking from the rest of the children of the state. And I think that's a tactic that people use to pit the rest of the state against the teachers. I do feel like we're the whipping child of the state. This state would be so much better off if the teachers didn't have retirement, if the teachers didn't get paid, that we are sucking things from the district or the state versus everything we have to offer. Vermont gives a great education to their students. We also spend our money here. Teachers are more likely to buy local, to buy Vermont. We talk about it in our classrooms. We talk about food to table. We talk about supporting our farmers. We are the ones who are out spending money at restaurants that, I'm still making sure I tip even if I pick something up because I know those people are hurting, and we're putting that money back into the state of Vermont. I love Vermont. I want to live here when I'm retired. I don't want to go anywhere else. But when people say supporting that system, which is the only system I have to retire on, because a 403B is not something you can retire on either. It's not as lucrative as a 401k. That's my net. And for 22 years, I've put into that system. And every time you say things like you basically took food from children, that's a problem. So I want the people who represent me to think about the words they choose.
Well, thank you, Stephanie. That is a heartfelt response, and I think we can all take it to heart as well. I think that I agree with Mike, who pointed out that many of us have been involved in education and have been involved with the schools. And as I think you can see with many of the things that we've talked about today, none of them are set in stone. There will be very difficult for us to sit down and say we support something right now and something that's a bill, because the bill will change. And we will have to have some patience to see what comes forth from the treasurer and her efforts, and eventually from legislation. But I think that he articulated it very well. And so we all have, the goal is to all have open minds and be able to, and weigh all the different factors when the time comes. I think there was a great injustice done to the teachers and the state employees, the teachers specifically. When I was on the school board in the 90s, Howard Dean decided in the mid-90s, when there was a lot of money in the stock market and it was going up like crazy, that he wasn't going to put any money in toward the retirement at that point. And that continued on for quite a few years. And so we lost the benefit of, the miracle of compound interest. And I remember members of the school boards at the time, several of us were sort of like, what is he thinking? You can't stop putting money in. You have to put money in. And the legislature did fall down on that. But luckily, fortunately, that process was stopped, and we put money in, and we have made efforts to go and work to try to make this a viable retirement system. It's not new. A gentleman by the name of David Coates, who's an accountant, has been talking about it, gave a speech before the House a few years ago that presented to us how important it was to do this. So it's on the radar. It's clearly on the radar, and we're going to try to do everything we can to make it work. But like I think Mike said, we may not make everybody happy. But I appreciate your heartfelt comments. With that, it is now 9:30. I think Tiffany, do you still have your hand up, or is that left over from before? Maybe it's from before. With that, I just want to say thank you to everybody for coming. Again, thank you to Casey for being our host and managing this plan, this legislative breakfast. We welcome all of you back. There were several items in the chat. For those of you who saw those were really helpful. We're going to have more events coming up in the next few weeks, and I just tell everybody to, stay tuned. We will be back in April. And I really appreciate everybody coming today. This was a really good, lively, informative legislative breakfast. I hope you all have a good weekend. Thank you.